What's up everybody, welcome back to the channel and another Outriders video. In my quest to figure out whether sniper rifles are in fact viable in the post Worldslayer world in Outriders, I slapped together a build with what I think are some really good mods specifically for the sniper archetype, but within that there sits two challenges which I think really keep this build from being viable. Now before we get into the actual details of the build as well as my main gripes with sniping as a whole in Outriders, let's first discuss viability. The point is that technically speaking anything in Outriders is viable, and by viable I mean you're able to kill the enemy and finish an expedition, or you're able to kill a boss and finish the trials. The point is that as long as you're able to keep your character alive, it's simply a battle of time until you eventually whittle the enemy's life bar down to the point where they die and you are successful. So when it comes to a question about whether sniper rifles are viable in Outriders, sure they are. Pretty much everything, 99% of everything is viable in Outriders. But the other side of this is the efficiency aspect and whether it actually is something that you can do within a certain amount of time that doesn't allow you to pull your hair out of frustration. Now, that's actually not so much my problem with sniping or the sniper archetype in Outriders. It's not so much the fact that it's not dealing enough damage, because I'm surely happy enough with the damage, and it's not so much the fact that there aren't a good group of mods and weapons and gear that supports the sniper rifle style. It's more so the fact that firstly, I feel like the reserve ammunition that you carry into a battle with you with the sniper rifle is just simply not enough. Now firstly, I just want to cover one other thing, and that is that of course when we are talking about sniper rifles, we are talking about rifles that don't have scopes on them and rifles that have scopes. I remember that this was an issue in the past when people were saying, no but dude, that's a bolt action rifle. I don't give a fuck. The point is, if it has the same ammo pool as sniper rifles as a rifle with a scope, that's a sniper rifle to me. The issue is that pool is too small. The whole idea of sniping is to stay in the back lane and to essentially shoot and not be there when enemies die and drop those little ammo pouches. At the same time, even though the game is quite generous with ammo boxes and running to them, you can run over to them and replenish your ammo. The bottom line is that is super frustrating halfway through a gunfight to realize, shit, I got 4 bullets left, so I can either run headlong into the enemies, get shot to shit, pick up some ammo pouches there, or I can turn around and try and see if there's a box behind me and loot that. It's not a really rewarding sort of loop, and that's my first real big problem with this. Now, I know some of you guys are going to say, yeah, but of course there's ways for you to, mod your weapons and everything like that you can, for instance, not lose bullets on crits. And yeah, you can use firepower, bullets like blighted rounds, for instance, to essentially keep your mag going forever, especially if you're using something like an automatic sniper with a larger clip size, like 24 or something like that. My issue is that means that you have to play specifically into that, and you have to sacrifice mods for that. And yeah, I know that this is true for other firepower builds as well, but the bottom line is that specifically when you focus into sniping, you really do need to fit a lot of different mods in there, at least in my opinion and in the build that we're going to look at today, for it to really start shining and to pull off really good shots that makes it feel like a sniper build. It doesn't really feel like a sniper build if you are shooting something 25 times to kill it. That's not so much a sniper rifle as essentially just a very slow assault rifle that you're trying to kill something with. So that's my first problem, and unfortunately I don't really see a solution to address that. That's kind of just something you have to learn to live with, and it is what it is. My second issue, and also something that you can't really do anything about, is that it is really not fun, at least not for me, to play sniper in any kind of duo or trio scenario in Outriders. That's simply due to the fact that it is very important that you land crits, more so even if you are trying to build some kind of reload mechanism into your playstyle. And the point is that it is really difficult to land those crits when you have big abilities firing off and eruptions popping all over the place, and shit getting blown up, and massive visual effects and things like that blocking away. Never mind just the general geometry in the game sometimes being a real bitch, like fucking titanium grass and all of that blocking your shots. So again, this one I don't necessarily have an easy solution to. Some maps play easier than others, some expos play easier than others, and some people will probably be affected by less by this than others. But and you can certainly play around with, you know, having your partners in your group essentially, you know, play things that make it easier for you to snipe. In other words, slowing the enemies or freezing them. That's certainly something that can be done, but that expects other people to play a certain way to benefit you, which is not always something that we have access to. So those are fundamentally my two big problems with sniping, and really the reason why I don't think that this is a viable way of playing, and actually super frustrating to me to play. But nonetheless, we did get a shitload of new mods and everything like that that suit snipers from Worldslayer, and I wanted to build something together. I built a sniper build back in the day in vanilla, and so it was time to update that and see if it was any different, if the same concerns that I had back then were still there, and unfortunately are. But in any case, that's it for my sniper rifle rant, and let's look at the build next. When it comes to the build itself, of course, please do ignore the transmog. I'm not actually running any specific set here. I have two pieces of Deadeye. I couldn't get the right pieces of Deadeye to drop to validate me using the third piece, the head piece, and so I ended up settling for just using a Sergio's beret. But the bottom line is, I think the net result of what I found here and the difference that Deadeye would have made in terms of like eliminating close range damage and all your shots counting as long range damage wouldn't really have affected my idea of the build that much. Like I said, funnily enough, the thing that I have the least problem with in this build is actually the damage. And when you get all of your mods to proc off a shot, you hit a crit, everything like that, this thing smokes. You can one tap pretty much all, you know, normal enemies in the game, as you should with a sniper rifle, and things like champions, elites, and bosses you can take down with a bunch of shots following that. Most likely in the case of champions, 2 to 3, maybe 4, possibly 5 if you have a shit hit aim like I do. And then of course in the cases of someone like Dr. D or so, it takes essentially a mag to drop them, which is not bad at all considering that you are literally using a build that is in a way not really optimized and not really pulling any massive benefit from any sets or anything like that. Now we will do this the same way we always do it, and that means we'll look at weapons first, we'll talk about armor and the mods on there, we'll look at the skill tree, we'll talk about the PAX choices. I will give you some advice on which ascension points you should be targeting first, and then of course at some point during all of this we will also be looking at the skills and the rotation. I think I mentioned skill tree before, I meant to say class tree. But looking at the weapon itself, I'm using a Radox Gaze on here, which is of course a rifle of a standard variant. So this means you don't have a scope and you're essentially just shooting across the sights, the iron sights. This is the preferred way for me to use a sniper rifle. I don't like the scopes in the game, so this was an early opt-in for me to rather go for something like this. And specifically on here, I have weakness trap, icebreaker, and concentration blast. Now, concentration blast is kind of iffy sometimes, and I feel like sometimes it doesn't actually fire off correctly, and I don't know if it's a mod that is perhaps written and supposed to be only used in situations where it's a shotgun and the distance is short or something like that. Sometimes it feels to me like it doesn't actually proc, and I feel like I suffer for the damage from that. But the damage we get from weakness trap and the damage we get from icebreaker more than makes up for that, plus of course all of the other mods that we have on here when it comes to our armor. All three of these mods are on 3-second cooldowns, which means every 3 seconds you can punch out this massive hit, and it's really important that you then capitalize on that by making sure that that hit is the one that you crit with, because that's just gonna really blow that damage through the roof. Now your secondary weapon and your pistol don't really matter, because essentially you will be running, the idea obviously is to be a sniper, but as I've just mentioned, the ammo issues can create situations where it would be a good idea for you to run around with a good secondary weapon. In the case of me over here, I'm using, this is just a secondary that I have on here because this is the same character that I have speedrun techno on. So this has Deathronome, Anomaly Enhancement, and Fortress on here, but obviously it would be a good idea to get yourself something, you know, maybe something like that has Dark Sacrifice or so on, because this is a sniper rifle build, and so therefore it's a firepower build, so you should be getting a gun that capitalizes off of firepower damage and not so much about ramping up Anomaly, which this Final Penance does. So again, like I said, let me just flip through some of my options here. Obviously something like that would even be pretty fantastic because it dumps a whole bunch of damage onto enemies, so it can be a good sort of thing for you to use until you get ammo for your sniper rifle. And of course you know, something like Wrath of Moloch with Dark Sacrifice and Ultimate Freezing Bullets on is never wrong. And this is of course a fantastic weapon if you're playing any kind of Blighted Rounds Firepower Techno. Now when it comes to the armor itself, as mentioned before, I have Surge's Beret on here, which is of course a Firepower legendary. This has cooldown reduction and status power on it as well. Essentially, you want to be getting as much long range damage on your armor pieces as you can, but failing that, certainly cooldown reduction is not bad, especially if you pair the build with Cold Snap like we do here, because it means you'll be able to access more Cold Snaps. And of course, status power means that those freezes will freeze the enemy for longer, and you will also be able to capitalize off of any other statuses that you have on enemies like Toxic and so on, and those ticks actually being more powerful. Now we have Sharp Eye on here, again, that rewards your critical shots, so you got to start, you know, hitting those shots and everything like that. And again, I commiserate with people that struggle to land criticals, especially if you're playing with controller, or like I say, in group scenarios where you have all the shit in your face and everything like that, because of course the DPS of the build will suffer if you can't hit those crits. I have Long Winter on here because I use Cold Snap on this build to essentially lock down entire portions of the battlefield so that I can take my time and try and hit those headshots and snipe. And this actually helps out a lot because it makes the Cold Snap reach all the way to the back of the arena almost, and that way you can really get a lot of time to essentially get those shots off, and you can also deploy from much further on and get those shots in. Headbanger is one of the new mods that came with Worldslayer, and this of course says that critical shots with sniper weapons deal 10% more damage. Each critical shot stacks a 60% damage bonus up to 180. The bonus is applied to the next non-critical shot but lost when missing a shot. So this is in a way for you to essentially be rewarded with, you know, landing a couple of criticals and then hitting a body or something like that. And the idea would be that you could go critical body, critical body, you know, something like that. And that way you could always capitalize on most of the damage. Headbanger is a great move in the right direction, because expecting people to constantly just be critting the whole time is unrealistic in a way, and this is a fun playstyle in a way where essentially the game lets you, sort of diversify how you are shooting at the enemies. Maybe get 2 crits and then you see some guy running around the corner and you tag him in the back, and that's where you get the additional damage from. So I think Headbanger is good on here, and it's actually one of the mods I like for this setup. Then moving over to the chest piece, another piece of firepower here. Finally, we do get long range damage on here. This is of course the Deadeye's Cloak. Even though we aren't getting the set bonus here, this is a good stat distribution, or a sub-stat distribution, for what you are looking for a build like this. We've got firepower, we've got cooldown reduction, and we have long range damage. I have freezing boost on here because we are going to be aggressively using Cold Snap, and so therefore enemies are constantly frozen, and so you can capitalize on some additional damage to them. High velocity bullets is good for us here as well, because this is just a flat 12% increase to our sniper weapon damage, which is great. And then of course, as mentioned, trash isn't really the problem. Just like for any other build, our issue is dealing with elites, captains and bosses, and Captain Hunter helps us deal 16% more damage against them. Then when we get to the pants, we have our second piece of Deadeye here. Again, just mentioning again, just in case you are skipping through this video and only looking at the gear in certain places, this does not actually have the full bonus of Deadeye. We're only at 2 out of 3, but again, the sub-stat distribution on the Deadeye pieces are perfect for a sniper rifle build, as it should be. And of course, we have bonus firepower, cooldown reduction, and long range damage on here. Now, collateral damage on here is another new mod from Worldslayer, specifically for sniper play. This says that critical shots from sniper weapons deal 15% of their damage within a 3-meter radius. A lot of these mods are about also helping you that when you shoot into a group of enemies, that you're able to take out the entire group by dropping one of the guys in the group, or at the very least by dropping their health fairly low, so that we could mop up the whole group with the second guy that you kill. So collateral damage absolutely helps with that, as does Icicle Storm. Anybody that plays Blighted Rounds Firepower Technomancer, maybe Borealis Technomancer, will know Icicle Storm very well. This is of course a mod for Cold Snap. That means that when you kill enemies that are frozen by Cold Snap, this actually causes this cascade effect through them that deals all this damage to all of them in a 5-meter radius, and it's a fantastic way for you to deal with large groups of enemies by simply killing one. And we also have Virulent Compound on here, which is another way for us to deal more damage against elites that have Toxic on them. And even though this build does not use blighted rounds. We are using lethal devices, which means enemies will have toxic on them as soon as you freeze them with cold snap or like a cryo turret if you decide to use that. So again, you can capitalize on this. As soon as a captain elite or a boss has toxic on them, you'll get this additional damage as well. Then we have the gloves of the Borealis Monarch on our gloves part. This has shatter on it, again just for us to capitalize the additional damage that we deal against frozen enemies. And I have hazardous modifications on here for the blighted turret, which changes the blighted turret's way of shooting. Usually it shoots this mist, almost like a toxic flamethrower, but now in actual fact it shoots projectiles that deal quite a bit more damage, and it has a 50% increased attack range. This is just another way for me to ensure that enemies are getting toxic status on them so that I can deal more damage to them with the mod collection that I have. We have Kingslayer on here, which further on rewards critical play and hitting those critical spots. So again, if you are only hitting body shots and everything like that, your damage will suffer with this build, because a lot of the mods capitalize on the fact that you can hit those crit spots. Last but not least, we have boots here, where I do have what I would consider one dead mod, and that is of course Toxic Piercer. But the reason why I chose this is because I wanted the additional firepower that I could get from this purple piece. This has status power and skills life leech on it, so again, not the perfect substats distribution. I would have loved this to have been something like bonus firepower, status power, and long range damage would have been great, but I'll take this. This has Euthanizer on it, which deals 16% more damage against enemies that are toxic, again, which is important why we try to put that toxic on there. And then of course to have Toxic Piercer here, but since we don't have any resistance piercing on this build whatsoever, it doesn't benefit from this. If you can find a better piece that has a better mod distribution and still has firepower on it, obviously that will help the build gain access to one additional mod here that you can use. I use the Cyclone here as well, which gives you a proportional and increase to weapon damage based on your health regeneration. Now we are going to tap into some additional health regeneration with our PAX tree, and that's actually where we will get some more damage from this mod. Now, talking about skills choices and your rotation, as mentioned, the point is that we definitely want to be getting cold snap on this build. It allows us to freeze enemies in their tracks and makes it a lot easier for us to hit heads. Creds is like crits and heads together. You guys know what I'm saying. And it makes it easier for you to land the shots that matter. So it's absolutely super good. Plus you can capitalize off of Icicle Storm to kill entire groups of enemies. So it's a great way for you to just murder crowds as well. And this is the reason why we want to get a little bit of cooldown reduction going on this build, because having access to a 10-second cold snap is pretty damn sweet. If you can get it lower, power to you. Now I used both turrets in this scenario here because cryo turret is just another way for me to get the frozen status onto enemies. It's actually quite good at doing that. Plus this is a fantastic distraction for enemies. If you throw these very far into the arena, sometimes you'll notice that enemies ignore you, or at least very least until you start killing a whole bunch of them, will fully ignore you and only be focused on the turrets, which is fantastic. Of course, we use Blighted Turret on here, which has a super low cooldown and is also a ramp mechanic for us, giving us more weapon damage. But furthermore, due to the modification that we have with hazardous modifications on there, it means that this is also quite good at putting toxic onto enemies, which you can also benefit from for additional damage. Now, looking at the class tree itself, since this is a firepower build, and let me go ahead and remove my face here quickly. Since this is a firepower build, of course we go top tree because we want to get access to all those firepower nodes. And so we're just going to go around here. We're going to pick up as much weapon damage as we can. We absolutely do dip down here to get ourselves some additional critical damage, as well as exposing toxin and marked for execution, which means that enemies that have the toxic status on them are also vulnerable, and this actually increases the power of that vulnerability. We absolutely grab ourselves Sniper Master, and then we just go along the top here. We grab nitrogen capsules, which gives us a decrease in the distance to an enemy to be considered as being, or for you to benefit from long range damage on that enemy. What this essentially means that instead of an enemy only being able to benefit from long range damage on an enemy at 18 meters, you can now benefit from long range damage on an enemy at 12 meters, because it's 2 times 3, essentially decreasing that. We also do get ourselves some additional damage to toxic here, and we just move along until we get to 2 sides of power, which is essentially more damage to enemies but also more damage to us, almost like a glass cannon kind of effect. We get ourselves the increase to magazine size. Unfortunately, this would be fucking goated if it was increased to magazine size and 50% increase to reserve size. That would have made a big difference, and it would have eased my issue that I spoke about at the beginning of the video. Unfortunately, it does not do that. We do get ourselves charge gunshot here, which is just another way for us. Every 5 seconds we can keep track of that, and every 5 seconds we can reload our gun for one big fat shot. And at that time, if you can combine that with all of your mods on your weapon also being on cooldown, that'll just be a massive download of damage onto an enemy. And then we absolutely get empowering antenna, which allows us to throw out blighted turret as often as we want, and then essentially get ourselves a weapon damage bonus of 30% for 8 seconds. Now, the PAX tree, of course, again, we're also going top, and I suppose I can get my face back on here now, if you don't mind. And we are absolutely going to be picking up initial striker, which ramps up our firepower, or anomaly based on which one is higher. Of course, firepower is higher here. We get lethal devices because this just works really well in conjunction with cold snap, which we're already using very aggressively. Every time when we cold snap, we toxic things as well. So you'll notice that the stuff in the back that while you're mopping up things in the front here, everything in the back that's getting the second or the third cold snap on them will generally die just to that effect. Now, painkiller on here is how we get health regeneration to stack on here, and this means that every time when you damage an enemy, enemies are constantly being damaged due to the fact that they have toxic on them, and there's ticks for damage, which means that you will always have this health regeneration up, which means that you will always benefit from the additional damage that you get from the cycle. So if we go back here, then we do go middle now instead of the usual, going like permanence and the dissection. We end up going middle for necrotic tissue, which says that damage against elite enemies is increased by 20% when you use a sniper weapon, which is not that great. I would sort of imagine that this should be raised a little bit to make it a little bit more attractive. But then we get Twin Reaper, which says that sniper weapons shots have a 75% chance to trigger an echo. This echo deals 35% of the damage dealt by the shot. Sometimes you'll notice this when you're putting a whole bunch of bullets into an enemy and it magnifies that damage. You'll see a nice little chunk of damage additional coming off there. But again, I feel that this is not as good as it's supposed to be, I would say. I think you are trying to get people to step away from just normal assault rifle, tactical assault rifle, blighted rounds firepower with a build like this, and so you want to give them something that's almost as attractive as that. It doesn't have to be just as powerful. I understand that that is the the main fucking powerhouse of Technomancer, but you do want to put something that's at least within the same ballpark, and definitely that would benefit from just increasing Twin Reaper's power a little bit. Then last but surely not least, looking at the Ascension tree, you absolutely want to be diving into brutality, and then you can essentially spend your points anywhere else. Now, you do want to be putting 10 points of into anomaly damage, because this is just a flat increase across the board. This increases your anomaly damage, which is mods that deal anomaly and all of that, toxic, all of that. Anything that comes from an anomaly source is magnified by this, which is really, really good. And then of course you can pick up armor piercing if you want, but in the case of just increasing your raw damage with a weapon, you absolutely want to be putting 10 points into weapon damage. 10 points into long range damage is good. And then essentially you can fill out the rest of the board with survivability options or ways of increasing your critical chance and critical damage profile with these two nodes here. Some additional cooldown reduction is always good for those really, really fast cold snaps. Give yourself some more magazine size here. Again, this would be fucking busted, or at least very good if it also increased reserve, but it fucking doesn't. Give yourself some more HP and armor here, of course, and then you can give yourself some more damage against elites and also just some mitigation against those elites. This all in all together essentially makes you pretty damn sturdy, which usually a firepower blighted rounds technomancer sometimes is not. Sometimes they are built quite glass cannony, but with the introduction of all of these changes to the Ascension tree, or the Ascension points rather, you'll find that you're quite a little bit more chunkier and more difficult to kill. And that right there is it for the build as well as the video. To me, firepower techno still is reigned supreme by the assault rifle tactical variants that you get, with a combination of blighted rounds, cold snap, and all of that. And to me, that is still the preferred way of playing firepower with the technomancer if you want to. I wanted sniper rifles to be more attractive, especially in a group setting where you could be like the sniper of the group. But I think that just in general, it could also come down to the fact that sometimes Outriders struggles a little bit with its own identity, with, you know, it having the accoutrement, the setup, the mechanics for it to be a cover shooter, but its entire premise and its entire game systems and its entire healing mechanics not really being suited to be a cover shooter, which kind of breaks the need for that. And I definitely think that this build, sniper rifle builds as a whole, would work perfectly in a cover shooter kind of, you know, Outriders world. But that is not the world that we play in today, and certainly not the, I would say, preferred way of playing the game, because you will be severely stunting your utility, your health gain, and just in general your speed at which you can complete expeditions or any content for that matter. Let me know in the comments down below if you've attempted a sniper rifle build, how happy you are with it. Do you share the gripes that I have with it? Do you think I'm blowing it out of proportion? And what would you change in the build to make it more lethal, make it more angry, and just in general make it kick more ass? But that's it. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it this far. It's just super important to me that you have a fantastic morning, afternoon, and evening wherever you are in the world. And until next video, fucking cheers.
They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me now.